Good evening and a hearty welcome to all our viewers joining us locally and across the diaspora to the launch of the Caribbean Contemporary Classics, a proud product of Hodder Education. I'm your host, Dahlia Harris, and we are broadcasting live from Kingston, Jamaica. In this evening's proceedings, we will celebrate the literary excellence of our Caribbean authors while paying homage to their cultural impact on the world stage. And to help us do so, we will be joined by representatives from the Hodder Education team. They will bring insight to the initiative and unveil the new collections from our world-renowned Caribbean authors. Alongside the Hodder Education team, we will be joined by the Honorable Olivia Babsy Grange, Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport in Jamaica, who will give her official endorsement to the launch of this series. We will also participate in vivid discussions with two of Hodder's prolific Caribbean authors, Dr. Paulette Ramsey and Debbie Jacob, where we will delve into their creative minds and draw on their inspirations. To highlight their works, we will be entertained by performing arts groups from St. Vincent, Jamaica, and Trinidad, which will no doubt bring some of the featured literary works to life. Let us now hear from the established publication company, Hodder Education. From what I can imagine are two of the most well-read employees, Denise Watts Lawrence, Head of Caribbean Marketing, Partnerships and Jamaica, and Liz Birch, Senior Publisher International Division. Please give them both a warm welcome.
Good evening. Authors are not just creators, they are historians. They are social and political commentators, and sometimes theirs is a voice of reason, reassurance, and hope. Their works go beyond expressing their concerns to enlightening readers, reaching far into our minds, wherever we are, and stirring riveting conversations with or without like-minded souls. Long after their works have been published, new generations of readers often discover them and are captivated by the new worlds they are invited to explore. Today, we celebrate the brilliance of our Caribbean authors. Through their craft, they have touched our vast world in incredible ways. Even as we are introducing them to a new generation of readers, old friends are invited to revisit them, however and wherever possible. Hodder sees and understands the talent of Caribbean authors who, over the last century, have told poignant stories of our society with equal measures of passion, levity, criticism, and a collective yearning for a better future. We are pleased to be associated with the works of several iconic, award-winning, and distinguished authors such as Sir Derek Walcott, Sir V.S. Naipaul, Dr. Cordella Forbes, Olive Sr., Michael Anthony, Trevor Rohn, Victor Reed, Jean DaCosta, and Paulette Ramsey, who will join us later this evening. A little later, we will bear witness to her expertise in using simple prose to reveal several layers of our Caribbean reality, making for complex, finely nuanced, and engaging storytelling. The works in the Caribbean Contemporary Classics collection date as far back as the mid-1900s. The works of art in this collection have been preserved in their true, and some might say controversial forms. The offensive words have been redacted, but none have been changed, allowing readers to experience the author's concerns through authentic, undiluted, undiminished stories told, through the lifelong lessons and victories shared, and of even greater importance, providing a platform for discourse and social change among a new group of readers. The spectacular titles we publish across many disciplines have been used in school curricula across the Caribbean for decades. We will continue to take every opportunity to showcase to the world the incredible gifts and talents of our Caribbean people. I'll now hand over to our senior publisher, Liz Birch, who will take us through the Caribbean Contemporary Classics collection in greater detail.
A pleasant good day. My name is Liz Birch, and I have the honour and the enormous privilege of being the publisher responsible for the Caribbean Contemporary Classics books, and also for our wider list of Caribbean writers series. Like all of you, I'm very aware of the legacy of these books and their significance, not just as Caribbean, but as world literature. They hold their own with the best writing from any cultures. So it is my very great pleasure to be the current steward of this wealth of literature and to share with my colleagues the keen determination to spread the word about these books still further. And what a list it is. We literally have something for everyone. Short stories, poems, a play script, novellas and novels. We have gripping adventure stories and fun stories for younger readers, novels for every stage of life, from childhood to extreme old age. We have iconic accounts of post-colonial experience and the lived reality of life in the Caribbean and in the UK from independence to the present day. We have reminiscence and we have looking forward, looking 300 years forward, indeed, in the sequence of novels by Debbie Jacob, set in a mythical future in the mythical region of Arabia. We include established and highly regarded writers, Michael Anthony, Jean da Costa, Cordella Forbes, Earl Lovelace, Norbese Philip, Paulette Ramsey, and gifted editors, Velma Pollard and Anne Walmsley. We have the privilege of continuing to publish the words of the late Beryl Gilroy, V.S. Reid, and Sam Selvon, along with playwright Trevor Rohn, whose works live on and continue to resonate with us. I would like to take a moment to remember with affection and deep respect Z. Edgell, whose death was sadly announced while the new edition of her renowned book, Becca Lamb, was in preparation. So the Caribbean Contemporary Classics list is a rich melting pot of warmth, fun, challenge, discomfort, hard truths, and heartwarming tales. Read, reread, and enjoy. You will be spellbound.
Thank you so much, Ms. Watts Lawrence and Ms. Birch, for sharing with us and shedding some light on the future plans for the program on the international circuit. Denise, you heard it, it is such a classic, the list of authors that they've managed to pull together, and just something for everyone.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It has been really a privilege for us to be able to be the steward of this list. When I was growing up, I did Green Days by the River in school, and I also became very familiar with Trevor Rohn and his works. I feel very privileged at this time to be able to bring this to a new this list to a new generation of readers. I think they will enjoy it immensely.
They absolutely will. And one of the things that's important is the way the authors captured the concerns of Caribbean people at that time, but just how much relevant it still remains now.
Yes, it is. I mean, we have Jean da Costa with Escape to Last Man's Peak, and she predicted a pandemic, some would say. So poignant in this time. We have, we talk about migration, and Paulette Ramsey deals with that subject matter so well in her two novels, Aunt Jen and Let Us Home. We talk about coming of age, entering into maturity, and we have Michael Anthony in Green Days by the River doing a wonderful job, and Aunt Jen does that as well.
Yes.
So yes, I believe it's a rich collection for all.
What I also like about the collection is the diverse ways in which the authors express themselves. Sam Selvon is one of the funniest. He can be, depending on how you
Some
read
say
it.
controversial as well.
I think most of them were. I think most of them were. And you alluded to that in terms of redacting some of the words, but still maintaining the authenticity.
Yes, that is
of it.
very important. It's very important for people to understand the social concerns that were prevailing at the time when the works were being written. And it's also good for them to look back and see how relevant it is to today's society.
Listen, a little bit for everyone,
bit for everyone.
every age group. every style, every palette
Every palette,
of reading.
everything.
It's an amazing collection.
Yes, it is.
All right. Viewers, please note that the Hodder Education team will be giving away some fun prizes at the end of the launch. So we want to encourage you to visit Hodder Education's social media platforms at Hodder Education Caribbean on Instagram and Facebook for a chance to win. Please remember to share, like, and comment. Now, after hearing from the Hodder team, I hope you are all as excited as I am to witness the unveiling of the new Caribbean Contemporary Classics collection. Please join me in watching this short video. Most of these classics have some special place in my memory. And to know that this new generation of youngsters will be able to enjoy these timeless stories as much as I did, uplifting and inspiring. I really, really am happy to be here. So here now to bring one of these timeless classics to life is Marla Nanton James, hailing from St. Vincent, with an excerpt from the novel Over Our Way, written by Jean DaCosta and Velma Pollard. The animation captures the dialogue between Principal James and Millicent's mother, during which Principal James relates the incident. As part of her duties as instructional leader, Principal James was observing a grade 2 lesson one day when a disruptive incident occurred. A student named Millicent was the stimulant, and as a result, her mother was called into the school. We know what happens when a Caribbean mother is called to the school, right? The animation was produced and narrated by Marla Nanton James, who's an education officer responsible for media and communication at the Ministry of Education, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. She's also the creative director of Muse Cultural and Creative Agency. Please tune into your screens to view the excerpt from the novel Over Our Way.
One Monday morning, there she was, sitting in the third row in a bright red organdy dress and red ribbons, and smelling of baby powder. She was sharing a desk with Parvati and Eric and Veena and Harry. The desk was only made for 4, but Miss put her there because Parvati and Eric and Veena and Harry were all very small and didn't quite fill up the bench. But there was Millicent sitting in the middle with her elbows sprawled on the desk on either side of her, and her skirt spread out on the bench so that Parvati and Eric were squeezed together at one end of the bench, and Veena and Harry looked as though they were about to fall off the other end. Millicent sat like a queen in the middle. The other 4 sat crammed for the whole morning, barely able to write, but not daring to complain, for Millicent and her red organdy dress filled them with awe. But by mid-afternoon, Millicent had taken over so much of the bench that Harry really fell off his end. All we heard was a little crash because Harry was not very big. In fact, we called him Mosquito. We heard a crash and a small shriek, and Harry was sitting in the aisle ready to burst with anger. Everybody laughed. The class was in uproar. Miss was laughing helplessly too. But then she made her face stern again and tapped the ruler on the table. Harry picked himself up and stayed standing in the aisle, looking at Millicent in such a way that if looks could kill, Millicent would have dropped down dead in her red organdy dress. "Millicent, you will sit at the end," said Miss. "Nope," said Millicent, and she folded her arms, pouted her mouth, and stayed where she was. Everybody was shocked. This girl must be crazy. We stopped all our laughter and stared in amazement. Even Harry forgot to be angry and stared dumbfounded at Millicent, then at Miss, from one to the other. There was complete silence. We were a little excited, waiting to see what would happen next, looking at Miss's face. "Come out here, ma'am," said Miss. Millicent still sat with her arms tightly folded and her mouth pushed far out like a pig's snout. Then Miss started to get up. Her chair grated on the floor. Our hearts beat faster. This crazy girl didn't know our Miss. She wasn't afraid of her in her organdy dress. She would put the rule on her, organdy dress or no organdy dress. But when Millicent saw that Miss was going to come for her, she suddenly sprang up and pushed Vina off the bench to get out. Vina didn't fall right down, but she hit her elbow on the edge of the desk, and that made her so angry that she flew at Millicent and landed her a cuff right in the middle of her chest. Miss rushed down the aisle and parted them. Millicent was crying loudly, saying she was going to tell her Auntie June, and she didn't like this old dirty country school, and her father was going to come and take her back to Belmont. Miss clapped her hands sharply. "Get your spelling books. Everybody outside. No noise. And you, ma'am, if you make one more sound, you will sit down right here by yourself." The rest of us were nearly outside already. Millicent stood sniffling still, rather bewildered at the sight of the classroom emptying around her. Then she wiped her nose and followed.
Thank you, Ms. Nanton James. You really brought that piece to life. Millicent, we have to read some more about your adventures in school. So we've heard that the Hodder education team has been doing big things for our culture and will continue to do so for years to come. In support of their initiatives, we have our very own vibrant and resilient Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport, the Honorable Olivia Babsy Grange, to give her official stamp of approval.
The cultural impact of Jamaican and Caribbean authors cannot be overstated. As Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport here in Jamaica, I congratulate Hodder Education on the launch of their Caribbean Contemporary Classic Series and the competition open to people of Caribbean descent across the world. The works in the series have contributed to the expression of Caribbean identity through literature. Many of them are now ingrained in our primary and secondary education curriculum. This collection features 22 of the Caribbean's most popular youth-focused books, including titles by Jamaica's Trevor Rohn, Paulette Ramsey, Cordella Forbes, Gwyneth Harold, and Jean DaCosta. Today, we proudly celebrate Paulette Ramsey as she introduces her new novel, Letters Home, a follow-up to her well-known title, Aunt Jen. We also congratulate Trinidad and Tobago's Debbie Jacob on the launch of her new novel, Neville and the Lost Bridge. I commend Hodder Education on their commitment to support a sustained interest in general reading and literacy. The launch of this series and competition will further the development of our region's writers. We look forward to the cultural fruit this initiative will bear for Jamaica and the Caribbean. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister Grange. And I agree that Hodder has been able to help impact our culture in a positive way. We now go the highly anticipated segment of our program where we speak to two of Hodder's prolific authors, Dr. Paulette Ramsey and Debbie Jacob. First, we'll be joined by Dr. Paulette Ramsey. She's a full professor of Afro-Hispanic Studies in the Faculty of Humanities and Education at the University of the West Indies, Mona, Jamaica. She's an interdisciplinary academic, an established writer, and also a researcher whose interests include language pedagogy, writing theories, and Afro-Hispanic literature and culture. She has published many scholarly articles, mainly in the area of Afro-Hispanic literature and culture, in international journals. She's regarded as one of the leading researchers in the area of Afro-Mexican literary and cultural production. Dr. Ramsey has published the rhetorical reader for Caribbean tertiary students, Blooming with the Pui in 2009, as well as translations of novels, poetry, and short stories from Spanish into English. She's a writer of fiction, and her novel, Aunt Jean, has been translated to German and Italian, and she's enjoying great popularity. She's also published 4 anthologies of poems entitled Under Basil Leaves in 2010, October Afternoon in 2012, Star Apple and Avocado Green 2016, and This Thing That Is Not a Thing, respectively. Now let us welcome the esteemed Jamaican author, Dr. Paulette Ramsey. Hi, Doc. How are you?
I am well. Thank you for having me.
That was such an interesting introduction of you. And so I want to ask Dr. Paulette Ramsey, who is Paulette Ramsey? How do you see yourself?
A multifaceted person.
Yes.
I'm an academic and I'm a writer. I have to juggle both. The good thing about my area is that I teach literature. So you know how the literature takes us into everybody else's discipline.
Yeah.
You know, the history and the geography and everything else that comes into the literary work.
Yeah.
So the literature is a great bridge between my academic work, my research, and my own creative production.
And is that how your novels came into being? How did you start writing?
I think I've always wanted to write. I think that when I read Spratt Morrison, Spratt Morrison was one of the books that made me think, so a Jamaican woman can write.
Yeah.
But I wanted a girl protagonist. I wanted a bright little girl, little Jamaican girl who would be able to showcase so much about Jamaica's rich culture, about our linguistic space, or oral tradition, or Anansi stories.
Yeah.
And I particularly wanted to explore this business of the Jamaican child who is growing up with the great-grandmother, you know, the iconic Caribbean matriarch, the grandmother who is bringing up this child responsible for instilling in her a sense of self, a sense of pride. I had that kind of grandmother
Yes.
who said, you're beautiful. You know, you're a beautiful little girl. You're bright. I want you to remember that. My first Bible verse was taught to me by my grandmother. I was only about 3, but she said, you can learn it, and I did. So it was that kind of grandmother and that kind of grandmother-granddaughter relationship that I wanted to showcase,
Yes.
in addition to the other aspects of Aunt Jen.
Yeah. So there are ways in which, as you said, the relationships come to life, but there's also a way in which where the story is placed, the setting comes to bear on how the story unfolds.
Oh, yes.
Talk to me about that.
Rural Jamaica, the rural Jamaica that I know, was a place of innocence and beauty. I keep telling my students now at the university that when I grew up, everybody was happy. Nobody was hungry because there was every fruit that you could think of in my district. And everybody had fun just sharing and caring. There was such a strong community spirit. There was hibiscus. We all had a hibiscus hedge. And some of us spent a lot of time teaching the hibiscus hedge, beating the hibiscus hedge to learn. And there were animals. I just remember my rural Jamaica as a time of just sheer joy, going to school, learning. Learning was fun too.
Yes.
And we learned everything. We learned math and English, and we learned everything, and we had fun. Reading. But I enjoyed reading in particular. I just love to lose myself in the world of books.
Yes. I mean, those were the days of community.
Yes.
And does that come to bear on how you shape the characters in the novel? Are these people that you
They
have
are,
seen?
yes, they are people that I've known.
Yes.
Some of them are composites of many persons, yes. Some of them are maybe somebody I lived beside, or an uncle, or, my own grandmother. My grandmother is very much a part of Ma in Aunt
Aunt
Jen.
Jen.
Yes. And the wisdom that she shares with this girl, and her caring for the entire community. But this thing of when you're in a small community, everybody knows everybody. Everybody knows that Sunshine's mother is away and that she's not writing to the little girl. Nobody has given them the official update, but they know.
Yes.
And everybody knows that Sunshine wants to know who is her mother and why is my mother not writing back to me.
Yes.
That's, and it's not considered offensive. If somebody were to see, like Miss Mabel in the book says, Sunshine, why your mother won't come back? It's not considered offensive, even though
It's
Ma says...
concern. It's
Yes,
concern.
yes. Even though Ma says Miss Mabel minds everybody's business.
Yes. Or as we say in Caribbean, she's too fast.
Yes, yes, yes.
But we need people like that.
Of course,
in the
of course,
community.
yes.
I know you are an academic and an accomplished one. Just how much does that also come to bear on your writing style? Just the clever way in which you manipulate the literary devices. and
Yes,
so on.
definitely, definitely. You're always conscious of the need to not just use words, but to use them, to craft them in a particular way. So you think sometimes in the rewriting, because as you know, writing is writing and writing and rewriting. Yes. So in the rewriting stage, you look back and you say, okay, I can put in, I need a metaphor there. I need a simile. And so I draw on all the strategies, the literary devices that I know. But in the case of Aunt Jen, when I was about 15, I read a book called Dear Daddy Longlegs. And this was a book entirely in letter form. So I've always carried that in my head. And then when I read Jamaica Kincaid, who is absolutely my favorite writer, when I read Annie John, I thought this was the purest prose. And I said, when I do write, I want to write just like Jamaica Kincaid.
Wow.
Simple prose, but elegant prose. And I, as a Jamaican, also have to write the way we speak sometimes.
Yes.
Where we can start a sentence in English and finish it in Creole. Or the other way.
the other way around.
And we go along the full continuum of the Creole as well. So I'm very mindful of where the characters are. How would a Jamaican in a rural community use a particular metaphor to convey a particular image with a particular intensity? We are great at language, We are the greatest users
Absolutely.
of language.
Yes.
Yes, and so I carry a lot of that. And even now when I go home, I just sit and listen. I just sit and listen to them. And I say, sometimes I hear something, and then it ends up in a book.
But I think that's one of the great things about the book. As you said, the ways in which you capture the linguistic nuances
Yes.
of who we
Yes.
are.
Yes.
So we're reading
Yes.
it on paper, but we can hear it in our heads as we read that this is how the characters speak. Tell me a little bit about the key characters. Of course, the character on whom the book is named, Aunt Jen.
Okay, so Aunt Jen is this interesting woman who has gone away. Her parents sent her away because she got pregnant.
Yes.
And they were disappointed. They sent her away. Most of that isn't revealed in Aunt Jen itself, but it's revealed later in Letters Home. In Letters Home, you get the back story to all of that, how she ends up in England and so on. The child is writing to her because the writing is set off by a dream she has of her, of seeing her. And the first edition has an image of a boat. And that's the dream she has of Aunt Jen in a boat, and then the boat sails away and leaves her. She begins to write because she can't understand, why am I calling her Aunt Jen? If she's really my mother, as they say, why isn't she writing to me? How does the fact that she's my mother determine who I am? who am I in relation to her,
Yeah.
and so on. Silence is a powerful strategy in Aunt Jen. Because Aunt Jen doesn't reply, but we learn so much from that silence. And then there's a different side to the silence in Letters Home. In Letters Home, Aunt Jen is now old and remorseful, and she is now writing
She
back
clears her
to her
voice.
daughter, who is an adult, trying to get her to write her and explaining why she had all these obstacles that prevented her from writing to her. And there is that silence on the part of the daughter now. While the daughter is writing to her in Aunt Jen, she really has this firm belief that blood is important. Family is important. Because she gives her so many chances. At one point, she sends them a card. And Ma says, send it back. This card says, thinking of you. Mark said, we're not interested in our thoughts. Tell her it's white people style she pick up. Ma is that kind
Wow.
of frank, firm woman.
Wow.
Nobody really knows who Aunt Jen is really. She hides a lot behind this silence and behind the kind of affection that her parents have for her. And everybody remembers Jen as a nice girl.
girl.
So they're not thinking that Jen is mean. Something must be wrong. So they go to Mother Penny and all of that to read up the dreams and what is happening to Jen, because that is not Jen.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a powerful imagery.
Yes.
Powerful imagery. Dreams. And you know our history of Caribbean families and what ships and boats mean to us.
Oh yes, oh yes.
So
the journey.
Yeah,
Journey is such an intrinsic part of who we are, who we have become. Because Caribbean people, Jamaicans in particular, have gone to so many different places.
Yeah.
And when you get to Letters Home, you will see where we do not only talk about the journey to the United Kingdom, when so many Jamaicans went in the 60s and 70s, some in the 50s, the earlier Windrush people, but that they went to Panama, they went to Cuba, they went to Ecuador. So there's all of that intricately woven into a book about a Jamaican family.
Exciting. It's exciting. I'm so intrigued. And I'm sure that it is going to be just another wonderful hit from you. Doc, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So much
Thank you. I've enjoyed
for
talking to you.
putting who we are,
Oh, yes.
putting who
oh,
we
yes.
are and
Definitely.
how we become.
And see, very quickly, let me just say that it's so important for Jamaican children, Caribbean children, to see themselves, to see families that are like their families, to know that what you have is legitimate. You don't have to aspire to be like some other family over there, wherever that is,
Yes.
you know, and to see our culture. And that to understand that our culture is not just what you think it is right now, but we have such a rich culture,
Dynamic culture.
rooted in our Afro-Caribbean heritage. And that's, all of us have to make an effort to expose our children to that.
Awesome talking to you. Such a privilege. And
Great talking to you.
congratulations. to
Thank you. Thank
Wow,
you.
wow. Dr. Ramsey. Well, we have a few questions from our social media viewers for you. And so Atia Khan, she's a teacher at the San Fernando Central Secondary in Trinidad and Tobago, asks, as a Caribbean writer, how do you find the balance between the vernacular and standard English when writing? What do you hope readers will take away from your story, Letters Home? So there are two questions. How do you find the balance? And then what do you hope readers will take away?
It's not hard to find the balance. The balance is what I think more of us need to embrace. The scales have been tipping a little to one side.
Yes.
And I tell my students, I grew up at a time when you would see a man on his donkey going to his farm, listening to his transistor radio, listening to the BBC.
Correct.
He understood English perfectly well, and he could turn to his friend and speak to him in the vernacular. So we've always had that balance. And I think that all of us who work with children, work in the education system, need to keep that in mind and understand that our children need to be taught English. They need to be taught English in order to be able to make the shift from the Creole, from the vernacular to the standard form.
Yes.
But we can do it. Many of us do it.
Yes.
It's not just for the stage. It's not just for, music. But it's important for students to understand that I must function in this context and function in this context, and I must be able to rise to the linguistic form that is needed. Practice. Modeling.
Yes.
And it can happen.
It's important.
Yes.
What do you want readers to take away from letters?
From Letters Home? From Letters Home, I want an understanding of the centrality. I think many of us think that migration is new. Migration is not new. The minute slavery was abolished, Afro-Caribbean people started to move. They had to find work to do. The minute the Morant Bay Rebellion was finished in Jamaica, Jamaicans started finding jobs abroad.
Yes.
No. One good thing that came out of our colonial past was that we were the first people to be taught to build railway lines. Jamaica was the first railway line outside of the UK and Canada. And the British engineers came and they taught our men how to blast rocks and do soldering and so on. And so when the jobs came up for the Panama Canal and the railway line in Panama and Costa Rica and Ecuador and Cuba later on, the railway line running through Guantanamo was built by Jamaicans.
Yeah.
They were prime laborers. They were the first ones to be employed. So Jamaicans have been going all over the world to make something of themselves, to seek their fortune, so to speak, in a cliche way.
Yeah.
So that is one thing I want, and it's true of the Caribbean. With that migration comes a lot of movement. This movement through the Caribbean. There's always movement back and forth. Jamaicans were going to Cuba back and forth. With that now comes the diasporic communities. So you go to Limon, Costa Rica, and you hear people speaking Jamaican Creole. You go to Nicaragua, you go to Corn Island, you go to Providencia, and the Caribbean coast of Colombia, and there are people of Jamaican and West Indian descent. So there are all kinds of connections that we have.
Yes.
Our history is rich, and our children need to know. Not just our children, all of us.
All of us.
All of us.
All
There,
of
there are people in my generation who do not know this part, this aspect of our history and how we have moved across the world and made contributions. And that is key, that
That is
we've
key.
made significant contributions
That is
to many societies, to nation building
Yes.
in other places.
All right.
Yes.
We're going to take a question from Sharice Blair, and it's a great way to let us home in helping us to understand that experience from the voices of the people who have experienced it. So from Sharice Blair, Dental Technical High School in Jamaica, if you had a choice of one message readers could take from your novels, what would it be and why?
That's an interesting question, and I'll probably give an answer that she's not expecting. The main message I want to give to listeners, readers, is to read. Read and read and read, right? Because there's so much to learn when you read. You discover so many worlds. Reading takes us.
Yeah.
When I did Green Days by the River, I went to Trinidad. When I did the year in San Fernando, I went to Trinidad and so on. So children reading Aunt Jen can learn a little about Jamaica by the same virtue. But I also want students, readers in general, to read critically. Not just to read and let the words go through your heads, but to read critically and to go below the surface level of words. There are always multiple layers of meanings.
Oh, yes.
Words carry so many different
yes.
meanings.
Oh, yes.
And treasure books. I say to my students, especially now when books are becoming things of the past. Books are threatened. No, they're now the threatened species. Treasure books, keep them, love them. And love words. Remember, Brathwaite said, words need love too.
Yes, they do.
Love
Yes,
words
they do.
and learn words and use words.
All right. Nadimi in Belize says, when you recall writing your novels, what were your biggest challenges? Did you at any point experience writer's block?
The second one, no, I don't think I experienced writer's block. I think the biggest challenge is balancing, finding the time between doing research, lecturing, and publishing, the academic publishing, because that is where the pressure is for us. Nobody is rewarding me for my creative work.
No.
That is what I do for myself. But writing is so therapeutic and itself such a way of growing. You produce something and then you look at it and you said, I really wrote that.
Yeah.
So it is, that in itself is motivating. But I can't say that I've had writer's block for research.
But not for creative work. Doc, it was such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
It
Thank
was
you
great
so much
talking
for
to you.
speaking with us. And before you go, we have a special performance from one of our creative arts groups in Kingston, Jamaica, Tribe Sankofa. They have prepared an excerpt in honor of Dr. Ramsey's novel, Let Us Home. Tribe Sankofa is a performing arts collective brought together by founder and artistic director Fabian Thomas. They are a vibrant and eclectic cadre of multi-talented performers who combine their artistry to add an exciting new dimension to the performing arts landscape of Jamaica and the rest of the world. Tribe Sankofa has shared their unique offerings in diverse spaces, including being featured at the Poetry Society of Jamaica, Bookophilia, the Lignum Vitae Awards, Gunga Walk Alternative Music and Arts Festival, Arts in the Park, and the investiture of the Poet Laureate of Jamaica, to name a few. They have also been featured at the 2017 Carifesta Symposium in Barbados. Additionally, the tribe has copped multiple medals and awards at the Taloa Dramatic Arts Festival and the Jamaica Cultural Development Commission's Speech and Drama competitions. Please tune into your screens to view the excerpt from the novel Let Us Home, performed and produced by Tribe Sankofa, Jamaica.
Last week I spent a lot of time thinking about my mother. I really regret not going back to Jamaica to see her before she died. I will go to my grave with that. I spent all these years in Mrs. Queen's country praying and hoping to see my child and my parents again. And my two parents dead without me seeing them. It is painful. It is a pain that is with you for every season. My mother was a visionary. She could feel, sense, see, and tell things that were going to happen. As children, we were so used to her telling us, somebody in the district is going to die today. Soon after she said it, or sometime in the day, we would get the news. Miss Miri dead. Mas Alva dead. One time, she said something terrible was going to happen, like a big accident or sickness. Somebody would get very sick or something else terrible would happen. Like what? We asked her. I don't know, she would say, but I feel it in my spirit. Well, by 2 o'clock that day, we heard Miss Louise. I don't know if you knew Miss Louise, but she was like a village crier. Miss Louise always bring bad news first. I was the first to sound the alarm in Flower Hill. We would hear her scream like an ambulance siren all over the district. That day, I remember everybody started to shout, "What happened? Something happened!" Miss Louise bawling. The news started coming back to us now after the first person reached Miss Louise's house and got the news. "Red boy John! Red boy John! Red boy John!" We pass it on like a ball. Run and as the news get to people, they started to move. Run to Bowen's pasture pond. We knew where was the only place that Red could drown. Everybody was running, passing the word along. "Red boy John!" My mother did not go to the pond that day. She went to her bedroom and knelt by her bed and prayed for Red boy's mother. She said no mother should bury her child, especially so young. At that time, she never imagined that she could one day bury her own son when Johnny died. No wonder she got so sick after that. She said her mother's belly bottom just dropped clean out, and her heart just cracked up into many pieces. That is what happened to her when Johnny died. And when Mama was going to die, she may not have told you, but I knew that she knew. She knew just like when she knew about Red Boy. Long before the day, Mama knew. She did not tell anyone, but she knew. That was Mama. I thought about her for a long time today, and I cannot believe that the last time my son talked to my mother, I was 24 years old. I would give anything to see her now, just like I would do anything for you to talk to me. Can you just send me a letter, please? Even a little short 3-line one. Sure.
Wow. Thank you, Travis Sankofa. Beautifully executed. Viewers, please note that the Hodder Education team will be giving away some fun prizes at the end of the launch, and we want to encourage you to visit Hodder Education's social media platforms at Hodder Education Caribbean on Instagram and Facebook for a chance to win. And remember to share, like, and comment. It is now time to hear from our second author of the evening, Debbie Jacob, all the way from St. Anne's in Trinidad. She's a journalist and librarian and the author of 4 books published before the Tales of Arabia series. These books include a collection of short stories, Speaking of Promises, a children's novel, Legend of the St. Anne's Flood, and 2 nonfiction books, Wishing for Wings and Making Waves, How the West Indies Shaped the U.S. Born in Mansfield, Ohio in the U.S., Jacobs has a bachelor's degree in anthropology from Ohio State University, a master's of international education from Framingham State University in Massachusetts, and a postgraduate library science certificate from Indiana State University. She's also known for her role as a prison reform activist. In 2019, she received the Express Individual of the Year Award for her work in Trinidad and Tobago's prisons and an award from the Trinidad and Tobago Mounted and Canine Branch of the Police Service for her work with the nation's police dogs. Please help me to give a warm welcome to revered Trinidadian author, Debbie Jacob. Hello, Debbie. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Quite an extensive resume I just read out there, but in a nutshell, who is Debbie Jacob?
Oh, wow. I am, I think, first and foremost, a writer of everybody's story that I can think of from everything that you read in my resume, who needs some kind of a voice or who needs to reconnect with their voice in some kind of way.
And is that how your novels came into being? The idea of voice and allowing others who are silenced to speak?
Yes. In my teaching, I covered both extreme ends of the socioeconomic spectrum with students from 45 different countries in the International School of Port of Spain and the poorest of the Trinidadians in our nation's prisons. And what I saw over the years while I was teaching is that everybody really basically had the same needs, the same interest when it came to themes, and the same conflicts that they were looking to resolve in some kind of way that literature could help them with.
Yes. I mean, when we spoke to Dr. Ramsey earlier, she mentioned just how much rural Jamaica impacted her stories. Tell me about your story settings and how the novels draw inspiration from them.
Well, it was very interesting for me to hear Paulette because in many ways we're doing the same thing, but at different time periods because mine is set in the future. But I also grew up in rural Ohio. So in a very isolated area with the same sort of experiences that she was talking about. When I came to Trinidad, I went to central Trinidad, which is a rural area, and lived with some friends in the middle of a sugarcane field. And all of those experiences have always been in the back of my mind while I'm learning more about Trinidad. I've lived here now more than half my life. I've lived here for 38 years. So everything I've learned as a journalist, as a teacher, as a prison activist, all comes together for me to write these stories.
Yeah, it's futuristic, you said. So, how does that impact your approach to writing and shaping the characters in the novel?
Well, although I have all these experiences and I've lived here for 38 years and I feel like the West Indies is my home, in many ways, I can't capture language in the way I would like to capture language, like a native Trinidadian would do. And I believe that preserving our language, our Caribbean languages, our Creoles, are really important to preserving our cultures. So by setting it in the future, I could get around that issue in some ways, because what happens in the novel is that this place that we know as the Caribbean has lost its roots, it's lost its culture because it's lost its language, except for one character who is the Jamaican character who speaks Jamaican Creole. And the way that I got around that was that he actually has his own translator in real life. Abina Chavez is his translator, because it was important to me that his language sounded authentic and that I did make the point in the best way that I could that when you lose your language, you lose your culture.
You lose culture and you lose yourself. So, what are some of the devices that you use in the book, and what inspired you to use them? I mean, we have a lot of metaphors in Doc Ramsey's. What are we seeing in yours?
Well, there are two things that were really important to me when I was writing this novel. One is that when I first came to Trinidad, I read a book called The Doorman by Cuban writer Reynaldo Arenas. And I thought it was the most brilliant use of a narrator I've ever seen, because you really don't know exactly who the narrator is until the end of the book. And I always kept that in my mind, thinking I'd like to use that someday. And I have done that in this book. And I plan to do it in all three of the books because they are a trilogy.
Yes.
The other thing that was very important to me was the theory of fossil memories that Guyanese magical realist Wilson Harris presented in his lifetime while he was writing. He actually predates Gabriel Garcia Marquez in terms of magical realism, and we don't know enough about him in the Caribbean and have not appreciated his contribution to Caribbean literature and magical realism the way that it should be. And in Fossil Memories, his idea was that we have culture embedded in us, in our memories, in the same way that we have our physical traits embedded in our DNA. And that is what I explore a lot in this book also. That's how the kids make the connection back to their original culture.
So the time span of the story, and I know we write great coming of age stories in the Caribbean. So tell me about the time span of the story and how that impacts the pace of character definition and how the story itself unfolds.
Hearing. She didn't hear that.
Debbie, I think I lost you for a second. Let me Let me ask that again. Are you hearing me now?
Yes, I hear you.
All right, awesome. So I was asking in terms of the time span of the story, how does that impact the pace of it and how the characters are defined?
Right. Well, originally I had thought about the story about 300 years in the future, and I saw that the back cover for the first book came back as set in the year 2222, and I thought, oh, I rather like that. Like 200 years and change from now is good enough for me. So it starts then, and it I would say it takes about a year to get through the first one. The time frame is really not identified inside of the book. You could think how long it takes yourself when you're a reader, because again, I'm dealing with time and the magical realist sense of the time. So the time frame is a little more lucid than it would normally be.
The concept of time is almost suspended as you read.
Yes,
Yes. So tell me a little bit
yes.
about some key scenes and subplots. We heard about the Jamaican character in the novel. I'd love to hear about some more. Who are some of the other exciting characters we're going to be introduced to?
Well, the main character in the novel is Neville, and he and two other children who work with him. They're 13 years old when the story starts, and they work on bridges. They're called bridgers. And at this time, the kids who work on bridges, because kids work and parents go to school, they don't know that the islands exist anymore. They think everyone lives on bridges. So one day when they're repairing a bridge, Nina accidentally discovers land. You know, I wanted to play with that whole feeling of discovering land, like it hasn't been there or always been there, which we've seen used in other ways in books about colonialism or our history. So when she discovers land, she ends up going missing, and then the whole book is this adventure about the other two boys going to find her. And they go throughout the islands and they end up in Jamaica, where they meet the Jamaican character whose name is Hun Dread. All the names are very significant, and you don't know the significance of the names until the end of the book. So it's meant to be, again, you know what I've discovered over the years, that wherever you are, whether you're in prison or you're in the school, you want a book that connects you somehow to yourself and the world outside there, but you want a fun read too. So they're adventures and they're fun, but there's also a lot to think about in terms of self. Like Neville's main problem is that he's this very famous bridge builder, but taken out of his element, he doesn't know who he is anymore, and he has to discover his sense of purpose in life.
How do you see audiences relating to some of these key scenes, Debbie? The concept of the bridge and bridging that kind of gap through time, through environment, through geopolitical space. How do you see readers making that kind of connection to the scenes in the book?
Well, I hope, there's a way of looking at things that we take for granted, even the cars that we drive. I mean, there's a scene where Neville describes like a graveyard for cars. And I hope that these things that we've taken for granted, that you see them in a new light, because there was a book I used to use in school called The War That Saved My Life, about a child who had never been out of her apartment. And, just the descriptions of her discovering things like grass. It fascinated the kids because they took these things for granted. So I'm hoping that they will fall into the different techniques that I've used in terms of description and setting and characterization and conflicts. There's a lot of different entry points
Yes.
that should reach them, because I have found, like I said, no matter where you are, the needs are the same for kids in terms of what they want to read and what resonates with them in terms of themes and conflicts.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's great that all of you in some way capture not just a single nation's perspective, but that this is for Caribbean children and Caribbean readers, and the ways in which it engages with Caribbean culture is amazing. We have a few questions for you from our social media viewers, and we're going to
Oh,
start
great.
with Nadine Belize, and she says, with your ongoing activism in your community, how do you find the time to write, and what challenges do you face whilst writing?
Oh, that's very interesting. Actually, when I started to write this book, Neville and the Lost Bridge, I had reached a time where I wasn't doing very much writing because I found all of a sudden I couldn't come home and write for 4 hours a night after working all day long and doing this kind of work in prisons and teaching in school. It was no longer relaxing. I was tired when I came home. So I decided about 10 years ago that I would give myself the best hours of the day. So I actually get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and write from a little bit after 3 till about 6 in the morning, at least every day.
Wow.
So you can find the time to write no matter how much you're doing. You just have to find what block of time works for you. And that's worked for me because nobody disturbs you at 4 o'clock in the morning when you're writing.
This one comes from Central Green, Spot Valley High in Jamaica. What approach would you suggest to teachers of literature? Approach should they take in easing children into the text, which is both politically and socially heavy?
Yeah, I think my success in getting students to read, because my students, whether I worked as an English teacher, a librarian in international school, or in prisons, I took the time to see what their interests were. So even if you have to use a book or you want to use any book for CXC or CAPE or anything, you have to figure out what it is in the book that's going to resonate with the students. It has to be either a theme, like the themes of loyalty, friendship, those kinds of things always resonate with kids.
Yes.
Or conflicts of who we are, how we're going to be accepted, those kinds of things. You just have to identify those in any book that you think is important and use those as an entry point for students, and they will follow. I had boys in prison who loved classics. They loved things like Jane Eyre. And they used to tell me that the reason that they loved them is because classics represented a time in the past that was good and not their past, which was bad.
Yes.
So you really need to get to know your students and what their needs are.
And what resonates with them. This one comes from Anna in the UK. What would be your advice to young aspiring writers who are looking to have their work published?
Well, I would say read, read, read. You can't be a writer without reading as much as you can. Write and make it a discipline every day. You have to write consistently at a given time when you're not going to be interrupted, and take every opportunity that you can get to have your writing noticed by someone. A good way is letters to the editor in a newspaper, contests. There are always little contests that are around that people can enter. Just look for ways to make yourself more visible.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Jacob, for joining us. And we also have a specially prepared tribute from a combined performing arts group in Trinidad. The video is narrated and directed by Mr. Michael Cherry, assistant professor and discipline leader for the acting studio at the University of Trinidad and Tobago's Academy for the Performing Arts. It features the local talent of students from the university, Malachi Hinkson and Jonathan Joseph, as well as the Maple Leaf International School, Sahara Quisnell. Please welcome the combined performing arts group performing an excerpt from Miss Jacob's novel, Neville and the Lost Bridge, Chapter 1.
The advisor, who wore a towering turban, even in the afternoon sun when he served Julie Mangles, whispered,
Arabians can't read or write, so it really makes no difference whether or not His Royal Highness leaves the law on the record books.
The chief advisor stopped in his tracks to ponder a point before doubling over from laughter. The other advisors raised their eyebrows at his scandalous behavior.
What is it?
They asked as they gathered around him.
Arabians.
He said, laughing so hard he couldn't talk.
They're mindless, stupid creatures, reduced to nothing more than living robots. Centuries ago, they lost everything. Their families, their homes, and their land. They live on bridges and they don't even know the island exists. It makes no difference what the king does with a silly law. They can't possibly even know what a secret is anymore.
Because he did not look where he was going, the advisor had not noticed that he was standing on a blanket of golden guava. He reached down, picked a rotten guava from the ground, and popped it into his mouth without checking for worms.
It will always be guava season for Arabians,
he said, wiping the juice running down his chin. All the advisors laughed at the joke.
Yes, indeed. Guava season. The hardest of times.
The chief advisor laughed.
But what's a little hardship for Arabians? Surely they used it after 200 years.
The king's advisors laughed so hard that they had to hold their aching sides. The royal record keeper had his own laugh as he dusted off the book of names from 13 years ago. He ran his index finger over the brown, brittle pages.
Ah, there it is,
he said, as his finger rested on the name Neville. He watched it carefully, considering his mistake.
What's in the name?
He asked out loud. He closed the book.
Well, I guess we'll all soon find out.
The royal record keeper pondered his mistake. Or was it a mistake? Maybe some force had led him to write the name. Maybe the boy's name had been written in the stars long before he discovered it. Racking his brain, the royal record keeper remembered what the old record keeper who had trained him had said.
Someday, there will be somebody to challenge the king. His evil power can't last forever.
The royal record keeper had turned away from his teacher to hide his laugh. Impossible, he thought. Never. The royal record keeper had to admit now that he was wrong. He could hear the king's advisors in the distance.
In any case, the king has bigger worries than the Arabians that he rules.
The advisor with a long nose snorted through his laughter. Without saying a word, all heads turned in unison towards the gray, stony walls of the Tower of Doom, where they could feel the icy stare of hatred even before they ever saw the face pressed against the bars.
Wow, thank you so much to the team from Trinidad for a well put together piece. And I'm sure that the performance will stick with many of us for a long time. Viewers, once again, please note that the Hodder Education team will be giving away some fun prizes at the end of the launch. We want to encourage you to visit Hodder Education's social media platforms at Hodder Education Caribbean on Instagram and Facebook for a chance to win, win, and win. And remember to share, like, and comment. Now that we've seen the unveiling of the new collection, we've spoken with two of Hodder's most prolific authors, and we've been entertained by sensational performances from across the Caribbean. We have one final piece of exciting news to share. Hodder Education has now opened the Island Voices Caribbean Contemporary Classics competition. So, I want us to welcome Denise Watts-Lawrence. She's rejoining me, Head of Caribbean Marketing Partnerships and Jamaica for Hodder Education, who will give us brief details surrounding the authors competition. Take it away, Ms. Watts-Lawrence.
Hodder Education is looking for the next generation of iconic and award-winning authors. We are pleased to announce the launch of the Island Voices Caribbean Contemporary Classics Short Story Prize. The competition opened last week, and it runs straight through until March next year. The competition is open to unpublished writers who are Caribbean nationals or of Caribbean descent. All you have to do is write your most compelling and engaging short story and submit it to us along with a covering letter introducing your piece.
Wow.
The best 15 pieces will be published in an anthology, and the overall winner will receive a £1,000 cash prize. Visit hoddereducation.com/Caribbean-contemporary-classics to learn all about the competition. Good luck.
Wow, good luck and get to writing. I would say that's a tremendous opportunity for a new author. So please get to it. Thank you so much, Denise Lawrence, for doing a beautiful job in launching the Island Voices Caribbean Contemporary Classics Competition. And we hope to see many talented authors being highlighted through this competition. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, we have come to the end of the program. We want to say thank you to the Hodder Education team for their vision and to all our guests for joining us this afternoon. Thank you to all our viewers for tuning in. And if you require further information regarding the upcoming competition, please visit the Hodder Education website on screen, www.hoddereducation.com/Caribbean/Contemporary Classics. Also, for a chance to win some fun prizes, please visit our social media platforms at Hodder Education Caribbean, and that's on Instagram and Facebook. Remember to continue to share, like, and comment. A special thank you to our event partners, the Jamaica Cultural Development Commission, and for that great endorsement by the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment, and Sport, Jamaica. I'm Delia Harris. Thank you so much for joining us. Walk good.